Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for making time for us. I want to credit my colleague Andrew Neska for not slipping anything about Philadelphia sports into his introduction of Rob and Adam. But he did bring up a topic that's on a lot of our minds, which is sort of the global, growing the game globally. You've seen the situation where you now, both of your leagues have tons of stars from outside the United States. A guy named Shohei Ohtani. I don't know if anyone watched the World Series. He was pretty good. Wemby is tearing up the NBA. And there's, it's 25, 28% of your players are foreign, and the audiences, or I should say from outside the United States, those audiences are growing. How do you capitalize on that for the leagues as a business, especially since all your teams are here? Rob, you can kick that off since you're just wrapped a season.
Well, I think I point to three things. Number one, I think it's important to take advantage of the combination of nationalism in sport. We try to do that with the World Baseball Classic by, realigning our players to play for their countries. Secondly is play outside the country. We'll be going to Tokyo to open our season next year, along with Mr. Ohtani again. Mm-hmm. And the last thing is, a good relationship with foreign leagues. And by good, I mean a relationship that allows foreign players to come here, but still allows, for example, a domestic product in Japan to flourish.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. And there's something parallel to that in the NBA as well, right, Adam?
Yeah, I'll begin by saying we stopped calling them foreigners.
Sure, yeah.
That doesn't help.
That's my fault. I kicked that off the wrong way.
But yeah, of course, we're an Olympic sport. We were, basketball, a tremendous platform in Paris. We were up in Lille for the group stage for those who were there. We had something like 140 NBA and WNBA players who competed in the Olympics, so a fantastic global stage. I think both of us are media businesses at the end of the day.
Sure.
And while we do same as baseball, we started our season in Abu Dhabi. I was in Mexico City last weekend. We have regular season games in Paris in January. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like a group that tours. Then ultimately it's about selling the music. And in our case, we sell media to 214 countries and territories, and we're the beneficiary of new technologies. Whether a combination of streaming services, but then the devices. I think in both our sports, time zone differences historically weren't our friend when people need to be in front of televisions. And if you don't mind me, Rob, we were just talking backstage about how well the World Series did outside the United States. All of the U.S. media largely focuses on the ratings here, but you should tell your own story. But it sounds like in Japan and Korea, where your World Series was on in the morning, obviously with the time difference at 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, they did the same numbers as they did in the United States.
Right.
And they did a huge number in the United States.
Yeah.
Right.
19 million in the U.S. and then 19 million in Japan and Korea combined.
That's correct. Just largely driven by A, passion for the game, and B, players from Japan and Korea that were relevant during the postseason.
Sure. And I'm sure, and the fact that people can watch on their phones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Adam, you made an interesting point, framing it as in the end of the day, you're both media businesses. For a long time, of course, the dominant media has been television, and television revenue has been a huge part of your business models. That's partly, of course, because live sports is one of the few things that will get people still consistently to watch linear television. But you both know also that business model is kind of under stress. You need more alternatives. I'd love to hear more about how you're managing that. Rob, I know that MLB has been in renegotiations with some of the regional sports television networks, and it's tricky going. Like, A, how do you handle that relationship? And B, how do you look at some of these other alternative platforms?
Well, I think the key for us is that the traditional platforms still have economic value in them. We've worked hard with our traditional partners to try to maintain that shrinking ice cube on the one hand. On the other hand, we have done a variety of interesting things with streaming platforms in an effort to get a toehold, start to develop a new model. I think the principal advantage is that we have a lot of content. It's high value content because it is sticky. People want to see it. And the streaming services give us great reach. It allows you to reach places that we have not traditionally reached. I think that's really important for the sport.
Sure. And will people watch it time shifted? Will people, even if they know the game's already over, will they, pick up some?
Yeah, we've done a variety of things, all sports have, to help people who can't watch it real time, condensed games and the like, that are very popular and available on our apps. We still like that live viewing experience to the extent we can get it.
Adam, the NBA and the WNBA just signed a pretty big new deal, but I imagine with that new deal comes certain expectations, on the product they're going to deliver. And there were some past partners who kind of balked at re-upping. What did that deal tell you about the sort of evolving media landscape for your league?
I think what that deal told us is, one, sort of to the premise of your questions, that being global provides an enormous opportunity. I mean, and by definition, for the most part, streaming services are global. And so you look at Disney, of course, with ABC and ESPN, but then moving to a direct-to-consumer service with ESPN, Comcast, NBC, and Peacock, and then Amazon. Those are our three new partners. I would say all three of those companies, at the end of the day, especially with the 11-year deals we did, put a premium on streaming. I mean, it's clearly the direction things are going. And to Rob's point, there's still a strong base in terms of traditional media in the United States, but particularly the regional business that you were asking about. It's, at least for us, it's largely been a cable/satellite business. And as Rob mentioned, I mean, when last time we negotiated our deals, let's call it roughly 100 million homes, and now it's half that. And so it's not just that where viewers are going and globally to streaming, but what's, I think, most exciting for all leagues is the opportunity that streaming affords. In essence, of course, it's internet television. And with that, you can do all kinds of personalization and customization that you can't do in the prior platforms. And then once you can do that kind of customization, I mean, that the possibilities in terms of endless numbers of feeds, different languages, different styles. There's one feed for a hardcore, one feed for somebody who's just learning about the game. Somebody wants a more humorous approach to the game. You're huge fan of Ohtani's and you only just want to follow him. Obviously, you can do that. But then beyond that, sports betting becomes a big part of it. Other forms of gaming, merchandising. I mean, that to me is putting, like right now, largely, like to me, with a few examples, but for the most part, streaming is taking the same productions of games that might have appeared on broadcast or cable television and just move it to streaming. And then it's, and I think to the extent people were predicting that fans wouldn't find those games, they're certainly demonstrating they will. It's a little bit of a pain right now, but we'll get there. It'll become more seamless. But that's early days. I think what's far more interesting is how we're going to be able to increase engagement by talking direct, the same way advertising. When you think about it, digital advertising is much more customized. We're going to be able to do the same thing with our products.
Adam won't say it because he's too humble, but I think the unbelievable deals that he made with his new broadcast partners.
And this was $200 billion over 11 years, is it?
77.
Sorry, gotcha.
Show that whatever's going on with respect to the decline of linear television, the fact of the matter is that if you have quality content, it's an opportunity. And I think the deals that he so wisely did are just a concrete example of that.
You were also talking about digital engagement, and I think a question for people that everybody across industries has right now is, how do I engage better with a digital native generation? Not just millennials, but now increasingly Gen Z. Are you finding that there's kind of a direct correlation on your alternative to television platforms between, digitalness of the medium and youth of the audience?
Yeah, we do. From a demographic perspective, our digital products are much younger than the traditional television audience. I don't think that tells you so much about the content as it does about the audience that you're drawing from.
Sure.
The fact of the matter is there's a lot of things that you can do on the digital side that I think are important to younger people. Enhancements, Adam referred to sports betting, the gaming overlay, providing merchandise opportunities, which is essentially a second screen opportunity. All of those things help with the age of the audience.
Speaking of gaming, it occurred to me in a blast of obviousness that you can't really bet on a game that is over. And if you could, I would be retired and I wouldn't be here right now. But is there sort of a symbiotic relationship between sports gaming and the sort of sustenance of the live broadcast audience? I realize you don't have to watch a game to bet on it, but with more people doing sort of mid-game prop bets and things like that, I mean, does that kind of keep some of that linear TV audience afloat, or boost the demand for live?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a multiple times more likely, your research is to watch a game if you're betting on it. So in two ways. One is, if anybody, sort of U.S. people here, if you go to a Super Bowl party, even if it's not your team, and you go in, there's one of those things when you go in, the boxes, and you got Green Bay, whatever, you're all in, right?
Yes.
It's like, that's just sort of naturally that if you have a betting interest in the game, even if it's a low amount of money. So that's number one. But so that'll cause you to watch. But maybe even more importantly, most of the betting has moved to what the industry calls in play. So you're not betting like when we were kids, like over, under, point spread before the game starts. The game starts, then you start betting. And you can bet on the outcome once the game starts, and odds change throughout the game. But you can also bet on various events throughout the game. You can bet on quarter scores. You can bet on assists in a particular score. Almost unlimited numbers of permutations that you can bet on. And absolutely, that causes enormous engagement, because one easy example is here in New York, if you're a New York Knicks fan and your team is down by 10, with a minute to go or whatever, and you're, okay, I'm going to turn it off, or they're up by 10 with a minute to go. If you're wagering on different aspects of the game, you're in it to the very end. And one of the things, I'm sure it's the case for baseball too, that we focus on, it's not just the unique number of viewers you have in a telecast, but a rating is, average people, per minute. And so then the question becomes, if you can take somebody, our telecasts are 2.5 hours, so I may have this slightly off, but let's say the average viewer is watching a 2.5 hour telecast for 45 minutes. If you can take the average viewer and get them to watch for 10 more minutes, it's a lot easier to lift your rating that way than find people who we also want to find, but who aren't now watching NBA or WNBA basketball, and convince them to tune in the first place.
I think it's one of the interesting things about, or misconceptions about sports betting, for the leagues, is really about engagement. We have a data business and sponsorship business that, has been driven to some extent, but the real hard economics, not that significant. It is the driving additional broadcast engagement where the real value is for, I think, all the leagues.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. By the way, have the privilege of asking questions to these folks, but we welcome your questions too. If you're interested in asking a question, raise your hand. We'll send a microphone your way, and you too can talk to the commissioners of the MLB and NBA. So there are, when I was a kid, betting was kind of stigmatized, and it was mostly illegal in most places outside of Vegas. Obviously the legal landscape has completely changed, but there's still, issues around worries about players being involved in gambling. There's worries around gambling addiction for the audiences. Like, how do your organizations sort of manage and safeguard yourselves so that people don't question the integrity of the game?
Well, I mean, all the leagues, us included, have specific rules that apply to players and employees that have the potential for affecting the outcome of the game, number one. Number two, legalization has actually made enforcement and monitoring of what's going on much easier. We have relationships with a variety of companies that allow us to monitor sports betting, and all the discipline in our league. I'm not sure Adam can speak for himself. Every single one has been driven by monitoring activity that we couldn't have done during the illegal era.
Yeah, I'll just add, obviously there was plenty of sports betting when we were kids, but what really changed the market dramatically was the internet. It disrupted the sports betting industry just like so many others. And what I used to say, I mean, before the Supreme Court, overturned the federal law that prohibited it essentially everywhere but Vegas, you could go to Google and put in bet baseball, bet NBA, and there'd be unlimited number of sites, and with little flags of credit cards and things like that. So it was a gray area of the law. I think to Rob's point, now that it's become legal, and I think we're up to 35 states or so, the only thing I don't like about that is I'd prefer a federal set of rules so that we weren't dealing with various regulations state by state. But putting that aside, that the issue now is, do you want sports betting to be in the shadows illegal, non-transparent, or do you want it to be open, where you can monitor it, where people put in credit cards, where you can instantly detect, just like on a stock exchange, aberrant behavior? And I think for both leagues, we ultimately come at it the same way. If there's unusual activity around a stock, if something unusual is going on, that's a flag to investigate. If it was all illegal, you'd have no idea what was happening.
To give you an idea how robust this monitoring is, there's actually a college coach, college baseball coach, who lost his job as a result of, he made a bet while he happened to be a fan in a major league park. Our monitoring service picked that up. We turned it over to the college. He lost his job. So you think about it, it's not a player or a coach, one of ours,
Sure.
but it did. That's how robust the monitoring really is.
And the tech makes the monitoring easier and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I had a question off to my right. Could you just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Jennifer McCullum, I'm the CEO of Catalyst, and we focus on gender equity and inclusion. So we love what's happening with soccer and in the WNBA. But for MLB specifically, I was talking to my husband about how would it be great for New York to be playing together. He's like, no, it's going to be Dodgers, New York, because the major market teams can afford to pay more. And therefore, we're going to see more and more of the major market teams in the playoffs always. And by the way, it's better for ratings and it's better for revenue. So I'm just curious about how you feel about, is it major market because they can afford to pay?
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, I've worked in baseball since the late 1980s. We've been hearing forever that it was going to be the major markets that have the advantage from a payroll perspective, and they're going to take over. And, I'll be honest with you, from the perspective of the business, it's been precious few times when we have had that major market matchup. I mean, it's really hard to remember the last time where you got two big markets like LA and New York. Having said that, we always worry about not only the ability of all of our markets to compete, but the perception of the ability of those markets to compete. It's a challenge for us. It's the centerpiece of collective bargaining in our industry and most professional sports, because at the end of the day, what we sell is competition, and everybody needs to have a chance to compete.
Sure. Had a question up at the top of the room.
Hi, my name is Lisa Sun. I'm the CEO of Gravitas, and my question is for Commissioner Silver. First of all, I've been a lifelong NBA fan. The Lakers paid for my first year of college. And I'm a Liberty season ticket holder for the last 5 years, so go Liberty. There's been a lot of questions around the return on investment for women's sports, and especially some of the press that came out over the last few weeks. How do you respond to the questions around player salary, continued investment from the owners? Because my season ticket package went up 3x for the renewal this year, and I'm just wondering how you think about the future of the WNBA.
Well, first, thank you for all your fandom. Appreciate that. I'd say, it's a two-edged sword, right, in terms of women's sports. I mean, so the WNBA, as much as it seems like an overnight sensation now, as you know, if you're a fan, is the 28th year we just completed of the WNBA, and there's been enormous investment all along the way from the NBA, which essentially owns half the league, and then from independent investors, by the way, some of whom are NBA owners, who also invest, who also own the rest of the league. And it's great. It's turning a corner. There's no question about it. We're going into collective bargaining. The players understandably want to make more money, but then as the business grows, there's a marketplace in terms of tickets or media rights, as we referenced before. So the market's going to dictate that those prices are going to go up as well. I think the teams, and I'm sure the Liberty is focused on this as well, you want to find the right balance where you're loyal to longtime supporters, but also at the same time, they want to grow the business and demonstrate that there is a true, return on investment in women's sports. And what I'm really buoyed by, particularly, over the last year, I mean, we started strong many years ago in the WNBA. We then lost, frankly, a lot of teams along the way, and we're in the process of building it back. Now, I think in part because we're in more of an expansion mode in the WNBA than we are at the NBA, or more room to expand right now. I know, and the WNBA, my colleague, Kathy Engelbert, runs the WNBA, but we do that, we work together, and our phones are ringing off the hook now from people who are anxious to invest in women's sports. And I think that, to your point, it's not just basketball. We're seeing it across the board in women's sports. So I think it's incredibly healthy. And by the way, I think a lot of it has to do with the internet. I think that we've disintermediated traditional gatekeepers. It's not, I said this recently, I was at an event with Serena Williams, and she was asked, well, what's happening where all of a sudden these women are emerging as great athletes? And she said, well, women didn't just become great athletes. It's like, of course not. It's that what's happened is the traditional gatekeepers who were in the position to say, this is what's going to be carried on our airwaves, or this is what's going to be in our, in our precious editorial pages. Now it's more expansive, and consumers get to decide. And it's not just women, but it's led by women in many cases, are demonstrating that there's genuine interest in women's sports and the product. And if you're a Liberty fan, congratulations on the championship.
We're close to time, so I have a yes or no question for each of you before we go. And the question is, will there be 3 or more new teams in your respective leagues by the time you end your terms as commissioner? First to you.
He's younger.
Yes or no?
3 or more. Sorry, probably no.
Probably no. Rob?
No.
Probably no. Well, that was deflating. That's my fault. That's on me.
You picked a bad number. You should have said 2.
I should have just said 2. That would have been easier. You get
Let me help you.
pairs, expansion teams pairs.
Yeah.
Well, despite that, I'm so honored that we had you and so grateful for your time. Thanks for all your insight, and hope you'll stick around and talk with some of the guests.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all.